The story of the Mexican-American War begins long before the first gunshot. It starts with a rising United States that believed it was destined to expand west, and a struggling young Mexico trying to hold on to its vast territory after gaining independence from Spain. The land between them, especially Texas, became the spark that grew into a full conflict. Tension built year after year as both nations moved toward a fight that neither side fully understood until it was too late. When Mexico won independence in 1821, Texas was a sparsely populated region. The Mexican government encouraged settlers to move there to strengthen control over the area. Many of the newcomers were American families who crossed the border for cheap land and opportunity. At first, the arrangement worked, but differences in language, culture, and law grew quickly. Mexico expected settlers to follow its rules, including bans on slavery, but many Americans brought enslaved people with them and resisted Mexican authority. Mexico tried to tighten its control, but the settlers pushed back. By 1836, tensions exploded into the Texas Revolution. Texas broke from Mexico and declared itself an independent republic. After a short but brutal conflict, including the famous Battle of the Alamo and the defeat of Mexican forces at San Jacinto, Mexico lost control of Texas. But losing control did not mean accepting that loss. Mexico never recognized the independence of Texas and always saw it as a rebellious province. For nearly a decade, Texas existed on its own, hoping the United States would annex it, while Mexico insisted annexation would mean war. By the early 1840s, the United States continued to grow and looked westward with ambition. The belief known as manifest destiny became a powerful idea across the country. Many Americans believed it was the nation's mission to spread its influence across the continent, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. They saw empty land waiting for settlement, ignoring that. As the war entered its next phase, the United States expanded its operations beyond the disputed borderlands. The early clashes along the Rio Grande had given American forces confidence, but no one expected the scale of the campaign that was about to unfold. President Polk pushed for a wider strategy, aiming to take northern Mexico and cut deep into its territory. This decision turned the conflict from a border war into a fight for control of vast regions that Mexico had governed since its independence. General Zachary continued to lead American troops in the north. After securing positions near the Rio Grande, he advanced south toward Monterrey, a major city with strong defenses. The march was long, hot and grueling. Mexican forces under General Pedro de Ampudia prepared for the attack, using the city's thick stone walls and narrow streets to their advantage. When Taylor's army reached Monterrey in September 1846, they found the city turned into a fortress. The battle that followed was intense and bloody. American troops had to fight street by street, often facing fire from rooftops and windows. The smell of gunpowder and the sound of shattering walls filled the air as both sides pushed for control. The fighting lasted several days before Ampudia agreed to surrender the city under terms that allowed Mexican troops to withdraw. Taylor accepted these terms, wanting to avoid more casualties, but the decision angered President Polk, who believed the victory should have been absolute. Polk worried that Taylor was too cautious and too popular. As political rivalries grew, Polk shifted his support to another general, Winfield, a tall and methodical officer known for his discipline and careful planning. While Taylor consolidated his position in northern Mexico, the war spread west. American naval forces moved along the Pacific coast, targeting key ports in California. In 1846, settlers in California, many of them American immigrants, staged the Bear Flag Revo. General Winfield Scott's plan to capture Mexico City marked a decisive and daring stage of the war. In March 1847, American forces landed at Veracruz, a heavily fortified port on the Gulf Coast. The city had walls, cannons, and troops ready to defend it, but Scott was determined to secure a foothold. He organized a siege that combined careful planning with relentless pressure. For several weeks, American artillery pounded the city while infantry dug trenches and prepared positions. Mexican defenders resisted fiercely, but Scott's methodical approach minimized unnecessary losses and gradually wore them down. After weeks of bombardment, Veracruz surrendered. The city became the first major victory in Scott's march toward the heart of Mexico. With a secure base, American forces moved inland through difficult terrain, including mountains, rivers, and valleys. Mexican forces, reorganized under Santa Anna, tried to slow the advance with skirmishes and ambushes. However, the Americans were disciplined, and Scott maintained tight control over his troops, logistics, and communications. Each step toward Mexico City was hard-fought, and the journey tested both sides physically and mentally. The Americans next faced battles at Cerro Gordo and other passes that guarded the approach to the capital. At Cerro Gordo, Scott used clever tactics to outflank Mexican positions. He sent units to climb difficult terrain and attack from unexpected directions while keeping the main force engaged in the front. The maneuver caught Santa Anna off guard. Despite fierce resistance, the Americans broke through the Mexican lines. The victory at Cerro Gordo gave Scott access to the central plateau leading to Mexico City and provided him with captured artillery, supplies, and a morale boost for his army. As the campaign pressed on, the war showed its brutal reality. Mexican towns were occupied, and civilians often suffered as battles moved through their regions. Both sides faced exhaustion, disease. With Mexico City under American control, both nations faced the reality of the war's consequences. The United States held a clear military advantage, and Mexico's government struggled to maintain order. Political instability plagued Mexico, with leaders divided over whether to continue fighting or accept terms for peace. Meanwhile, the U.S. focused on securing a formal treaty to legitimize its territorial gains and end the conflict. Negotiations began in earnest, eventually leading to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in February 1848. Under its terms, Mexico officially recognized the Rio Grande as the southern border of Texas. In addition, Mexico ceded vast territories to the United States, including present-day California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and parts of Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, and Texas. In return, the United States agreed to pay $15 million in compensation and assume claims by American citizens against the Mexican government. The treaty reshaped the map of North America and marked one of the largest land transfers in U.S. history. The human cost of the war was enormous. Tens of thousands of soldiers on both sides had died from battle, disease, and exposure. Civilians suffered displacement, property loss, and economic hardship. The war left lasting resentment in Mexico, as the nation had lost nearly half of its territory and endured humiliation on the battlefield. In the United States, the war intensified political debates. Some praised the victory as proof of national strength and manifest destiny, while others criticized it as an unjust expansionist conflict that had deepened tensions over slavery and sectional divisions. The military lessons of the war were also significant. The U.S. Army gained experience in planning complex operations over long distances, conducting amphibious landings, and navigating difficult terrain. Many officers who served during the Mexican-American War, including Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant, and Thomas "Stonewall" Jack